Story 1. Back in the late 1980s, my mother, Nancy, was diagnosed with a degenerative neurological condition. My father was working long hours to put a roof over our heads and keep my mom seeing the best doctors, and eventually my parents realized that with 2 small kids and a body that was slowly but surely shutting down on her, she needed more help. We had an au pair for a while, but it wasn't a great fit. There was talk of hiring a nursing company to provide in-home care, but my mom's sister Linda very graciously offered to let my mom, my sister, and me come live with their family, and that she would be happy to take care of her little sister. After a few months of working out the details, my parents and my aunt and uncle agreed to the following. My dad would pay for construction of a large addition onto my aunt and uncle's home. This would be a fully separate home with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a living room, kitchen, and an unfinished basement. My aunt, who was unemployed, would be the primary caretaker for my mom for the foreseeable future. My aunt claimed that she'd care for her until one of us dies, but I think we all expected it would be more like 10 or 15 years. My mom would have living rights to the addition until her death. Upon my mother's death, our claim to the addition would be relinquished and my aunt and uncle would own it outright. In 1990, my mom, my sister, and I moved 3 hours away to live with my aunt and her family. My dad stayed behind to continue working, and this separation did eventually result in a mostly friendly divorce. Things went well enough at first, and within 6 or 8 months the addition was built, and we moved out of their spare room and into our new home. It would be a lie to say it was massive, but it more than doubled the size of their house. We had our own exterior doors, our own heating and cooling, and most every utility. Electricity and plumbing were shared, but I think that was about it. For the first 18 months or so, my aunt mostly held up her end of the bargain, but soon after the cracks started to form. My uncle left my aunt in early 1991. Linda started getting lazy with my mom, and consequently her health was suffering. So my dad hired a home nursing outfit to come in every day and care for her. Linda took this as permission to stop helping with anything at all. Mom soon became bedridden, not my aunt's fault. The disease is terrible and couldn't leave the home, so Linda would do mom's shopping for her, but started buying more than just my Christmas presents or our groceries. A little at first, then a lot. Eventually my mom's credit card bills really caught my dad's notice. All told, we calculated that she had run up about $20,000 in purchases that were for either her or her kids. This was in the early 1990s, according to the inflation calculator I just looked at. That's the equivalent of about $40,000 now. My dad was working 70-hour weeks for the overtime so he could cover his own mortgage, repaying his $401k for the loan he took out to build the addition, and these massive credit card bills. By late 1993, there was a confrontation. My dad canceled the credit cards and said, "You are spending me dry. I can't have surprise bills like these anymore," and my aunt in turn said, "Get out of my house." Since it was an addition and not technically a separate home, and since my dad didn't have the money for an expensive legal battle, there was little we could do, living rights be damned. Right at that same time, the house went into foreclosure. Linda had stopped paying the mortgage 6 or so months before. I'm fuzzy on this number, but it's in the ballpark, and the bank foreclosed. Linda didn't have the money to get current on the mortgage. My dad began making plans to buy the mortgage from the bank and take ownership of the whole property. Things were looking good on this front, and he told us that we'd be able to stay in our home. By this point, I was 12 years old and had lots of friends, so I really did not want to move. His plan was that he would charge Linda a fair rent for her half of the house. We would continue to live in our half, and the door that connected the 2 halves would be forever locked, sort of like a duplex. It's at this point that I need to introduce the last character to the story, whom I will call Maria. Maria was the first wife of my mom's and Linda's older brother. They had been married for a short time in the 1970s, and Maria became very close with her new sisters-in-law. After she split from my uncle, she remained very friendly with both Linda's family and mine, and growing up I called her Aunt Maria. Anyway, Linda now knows that my dad is planning on buying the house from the bank, and she panics. Makes sense. Losing your home is scary. She calls anyone she can think of that will give her the money to get current on the mortgage. And Maria finally comes through and says, "Yeah, of course I'll help you out." Linda calls my dad and gloats that she's not losing her house and reiterates that my mom, my sister, and I can move out. My dad calls Maria and tries to convince her not to swoop in and save Linda's bacon. A move is going to be hard for the kids and extremely hard for Nancy. Linda has neglected Nancy and not held up her end of the bargain, etc. Maria says that she's committed to her decision. My dad gives one bit of advice that will wind up being very important. Well then, don't just give her money to get current on her mortgage. She'll fall behind again soon enough. The house will still get foreclosed on, and you'll be out the money you gave her. Buy the mortgage from the bank instead and just charge Linda rent. That way you've at least got something for your money. In early 1994, we moved out of the addition. By early 1996, Maria rang my dad up. She did indeed buy the mortgage from the bank and now owns the property outright. Linda swore up and down that she would pay rent, but lo and behold, she hasn't paid any rent over the last 2 years. Maria asked if my dad would be interested in buying the property from her. It was a bit of a stretch since he was paying for 2 homes, his and the one I lived in with my mom and sister. But he put the money together and soon enough we owned the property in question. At this point, Linda is in touch with my dad and is no longer extremely nasty and threatening to him. She's as sweet as can be, promising that she will pay him rent and be a great tenant. My dad said, "That's fine, you can rent the house, but if you miss a payment I will begin eviction proceedings immediately." They drew up a contract, signed it, and I think she made 2 rent payments before calling up and asking for more time. He told her, "I'm sorry, Linda, but if you don't have money in my hands by the due date spelled out in the contract, I am going to evict you." The date came and went. The money never showed up, and my dad gleefully began eviction proceedings. They knew my dad meant business and moved out on their own before the sheriff did it for them. We owned the house as a rental property for several years, using the income to fund my mom's medical care. Despite being separated since 1990, my parents stayed married until 2002 so that my mom would have health insurance. My dad gave the house to my mom in the divorce settlement, and it was sold to pay for her care in a nursing facility, where she lived from 2000 until her death in 2009. Story 2. Back in 2005, I worked weekends delivering Chinese food for a small restaurant in my town. I was paid $8 per hour plus tips. During the winter months, we were very busy because we were the only Chinese restaurant in the area that delivered. Frequent customers of ours were from this real prestigious prep school, only about 4 miles from the restaurant. These kids were from very wealthy families and rarely ever tipped me. But that's how things go, and they usually didn't order anything more than $20 worth of food. I returned to the restaurant one night and was given an order for a student at the school. The deal was that the students were to meet all delivery drivers at the cafeteria. This was arranged by the school with all the local restaurants that delivered. Anyway, I drove to the school through this snowstorm we were getting and pulled into the cafeteria parking lot. I walk inside with the food and call out the name of the customer on the receipt. No one comes over to me. At this time I don't have a cell phone, so I can't call him. I wait for 10 minutes and still he doesn't show, so I take the food and go back to the restaurant. When I get back, my boss, who speaks broken English, tells me the student called the restaurant asking where his food was. I told my boss I was waiting for him in the cafeteria for 10 minutes, and he never showed. He sends me back to the school. So I drive back to the school and go back into the cafeteria. Again, he doesn't show for 15 minutes. Now I'm pissed because this is wasting my gas. I get back in the car and drive back to the restaurant again. I told the boss he didn't show up again. We put his food aside and he is about to send me on another delivery. The phone rings. It's him. The cashier hands me the phone. Me giving a bit of an attitude. "Yeah, you placed the order?" Entitled kid. "Yeah, I've been waiting for you all this time." Me, where? I was at the cafeteria twice and waited 10 minutes the first time and 15 the second time. You never showed. Entitled kid, well, come back now, I'll be there. I hang up and get back in the car. I drive back to the school again, and there he is waiting for me in the parking lot. He's about 6'3" and looks like he played football for the school. I'm only 5'8" and not really built, but could hold my own when needed. Luckily, I didn't have to prove that this night. Me, this for you? Entitled kid, yeah. Me, $15.30. Entitled kid, yeah, after I got off the phone with you, I talked to your boss, and he said because I had to wait so long I could have it for free. At this point, I'm fuming. 3 times driving here, and he tells me this. I turn around and walk back to the car without giving him his food. Entitled kid, hey, what about my food? I open the door and put the food on my seat. I close the door and look at him. At this time, I am 25 years old. He looks like he is about 15 or 16. I know I have to keep my cool because I have no intention of going to jail for assaulting a minor. Me, you have a phone on you. Entitled kid, yeah? Me, call the restaurant. He pulls out his phone and calls the restaurant. I have him hand me the phone. The boss answers. Boss, hello. Me, hey boss. Did you tell him he can have his food for free now? Boss, what? No. Me, I thought so. I hang up and give him back his phone. Me, trying to pull a fast one on me? You're not getting nothing. Entitled kid, okay, I'll pay for it then. Me, screw you buddy. Don't ever call our restaurant again. We have your number and your name. You can never have another delivery from us again. I got back in the car and drove back to the restaurant. I bring his food in, and the boss tells me I could take it home if I want. I did, and my wife and I ate it. I thought this would be the end of it. Nope. The next day I get called into work early. Apparently entitled kid decided to call his mother saying that I refused to give him his food. I get there and entitled kid is with his entitled mother talking to my boss. Entitled mother, why didn't you give my son his food? Me, ma'am, I tried to deliver the food to your brat 2 times last night and ended up missing out on about 5 other orders because he wasn't where he was supposed to be. And then I got there the 3rd time and he tried to pull a fast one on me. Entitled mother, you should have just given it to him for having to wait so long. You probably take forever anyway. Here comes my anger again. Me, which, if he was where he was supposed to be, he would have had his food. He was trying to be slick. He might have gotten away with it with the other driver, but I don't play that nonsense. Entitled mother, well, you won't be getting any more business from him, and I'm going to tell the school how rude you are. Me, go ahead. M then suddenly attacked me with her bag and started hitting me left and right, while other people were trying to get her away from me. My boss called the police immediately, and after a few minutes, they got there and cuffed entitled mother and took her in their car after investigating the situation, watching the CCTV and taking the statements from the people there. And I ended up pressing charges for assault on entitled mother. As for the restaurant, after this incident, any student who ordered food from then on had to be at the cafeteria. If they weren't there, then they paid a fine to the school of $5, which was sent to the restaurant they ordered from. Story 3. This is a story as a result of a PCS move, military move, back home, but still active duty, and the nonsense that ensues. I had served in both the regular Army and Special Operations Forces community for just over 10 years when an opportunity arose. It was an assignment in the middle of nowhere, but was near what I claimed to be my hometown, Military Brat. I would later find out that the job was horrible, but that has nothing to do with the story. We had been in small town, USA for a couple months. We were pretty much settled in. My wife and I were not exactly prepared mentally though. Both sets of grandparents, specifically grandmas, had been away from their grandchildren since they were born. They were like flies at the house for the first couple months. It was finally starting to subside when this happened. I should mention that my mom is different. At least I think she is. I have always been the independent type, and I rarely, if ever, call home. It's not because I don't love my parents or friends. I just don't feel the need to talk, unless I really have something to say. I feel less of a need to call my mother. Generally speaking, don't expect a phone call from me. Why? She is scattered and typically has nothing useful to say. She likes to gossip, but she is the lady in the chain of gossipers that twist information and relays the wrong facts, or tries to convince me of things. Typical phone calls from my mother are below. Ring, ring, ring. Me, hello. Mom, hey, what are you doing? Nothing. Remember Jim Bob? No. Yeah, you do. You went to the pool with him once while you were 6 months old, when we lived in Germany. Sorry, Mom, I don't remember Jim Bob. Yeah, you do. No, Mom, I don't remember him. Well, he died. Thought you would want to know. Dear reader, this happens all the time. I have spoken on the phone with her no more than 20 times in the last decade, and at least 10 people I don't know have died. Unrelated, but this is our last conversation. Ring, ring, ring. Me, groggy, hello. Mom, hi. You sound sleepy. What are you doing? Sleeping. Midday nap? No, it's 2 in the morning. I am sleeping. First name, middle name, last name. What country are you in? Lebanon. What are you doing there? Army work. I called to tell you that random lady who used to watch you wrestle in high school passed away. Just thought you would want to know. Love you. Bye. I'm bad, but she worries. I have been injured in combat 3 times. I figure I will just tell her when I get back most times. Back to small town USA. It's a Saturday. I am looking forward to having some time off. My wife was a swing shift IQ nurse at the time, and she was at work. I was home with the crib midget, 2 years old, and the miniature human 6 years old. It was just the men at the house. I had woken up, fed the humans, and plopped them down in the living room to watch Paw Patrol while I took a shower. I get the Army essentials and return feeling refreshed from the shower. I conduct another inventory, but something is missing. Cake, crib midget, is missing. He is a bipedal monster, so I don't think much of it. I just ask Kelly, mini human of 6 years old, where his brother is. I get the typical shoulder shrug response. Great. I now have 200 square feet of house to work with. I will systematically check the house, either finding him in his room watching TV, or exploring the cleaning products under the sink. The first sweep was unsuccessful. The second sweep was unsuccessful. I now enlist the help of Kelly to find the speed demon. We are now about 10 sweeps in and I am panicking. I've talked to my wife many times on the phone. We have had the lost conversations. Babe, I lost my car keys. Do you know where they are at? Babe, I lost my army thing. Do you know where it is? No husband ever wants to call their wife and say, Babe, you know that bipedal toddler we have? Yeah, that one. Do you know where it's at? I was there though. The house we lived in was old. The locks on some of the doors were different. Very old, and some were complicated to open. Cake could not penetrate the front door. It just was not physically possible. This dude is Houdini. He was an escape artist. I was at my wit's end. I had to call my wife. The conversation went exactly how anyone would expect it to go. She was worried. She was hysterical. There was no way I would ever hold that. #1 dad coffee mug ever again. I did one last sweep under the direction of my wife, but it was now time to hand in my man/parent card and call the police. 911. Ring, ring, ring. Lady, 911. What is your emergency? Me, I lost my son. Sir, you lost your child. Yes, I took a shower and now my 2-year-old is missing. I have checked the house and he is not here. What is your location, sir? I tell her the address. What is your son wearing? Thomas the Tank Engine shirt, blue. Diaper. Where did you last see him? I have a large bay window. very large. Something caught my eye. The reflection of sunlight that bounces off cars screams through the window when they pass or park. A car had just parked in front of my house. It was my mother. Great. I am now about to have a mom conversation, and this is how it would play out in my head. This is in my head. Did not happen. Hey, Mom. Mom, hey. Remember that toddler I had? Yeah. Well, I lost him. Bye. I am dreading the fact that I have 911 on the line, and I am about to tell my mother the dreaded news. Then I see it. What was it? Cake. My toddler. I kindly explained to 911 that I had found my human. Now I was only a bad father in the eyes of my wife and the entire dispatch center. I was seething with anger. I am a happy-go-lucky guy. Super calm. Even in firefights. I simply don't stress out about much. This was not the case. I go charging out of the house. Me. What in the hell do you think you are doing? Mom, calm and shocked. What? I just went to the grocery store. With my child. You took my child. Yeah. I stopped by and asked if the boys wanted to go. Cake did. You stole my kid, Mom. Stole my kid. She chuckles. No, I didn't. I asked. Cake wanted to go. Kelly didn't. I told Kelly to tell you. Side note, Paw Patrol is like a trance for your kids. The damn rapture could happen around kids while watching cartoons, and they are unaware. God forbid the cable goes out though. Then the real chaos starts. I am a warfighter with 14 combat deployments. I have said, Daddy doesn't want to watch Barney for the 20th time today. Exactly once. There are some fights that just are not worth it. You told Kelly. You told my 6-year-old to relay a message to me? You thought that would work? Did you make that message contingent on a toy? Because he didn't know where his brother was. Well, I told him. Mom, you stole my kid. Then she said it. I am Grandma. I can take him. Mom, you stole my kid. Oh, I just took him. It's not called took. It's called kidnapping. Oh, I didn't kidnap him. You walked into the house, asked 2 children if they wanted to go, told one to relay a message to me. Why did you not ask or tell me? I screamed out, thought you knew. It went on and on with her trying to convince me of her point. I was not having it. I was beyond mad. I called my dad to get his opinion, and he just laughed. Grandma is in trouble. She was leaving anyways. I couldn't kick her out. It didn't even concern her mentally. She was oblivious to the gravity and severity of the situation. I was not done yet, though. It just so happened that this specific weekend was a 4-day weekend for me. I had the next 2 days off with the boys. My mom was unaware. She called on Sunday and asked what time I was dropping the boys off. Ding, light bulb moment. We had just adopted a new dog that was crate training. Let us capitalize on this. Me. Do you think you can watch the boys at the house so you can take Lola out? I don't want her in the cage all day. Mom, sure, I can do that. Great. Now my mom would be at my house. Even better, my dad would be at work as well. D-Day. My mom arrives at the house, still oblivious that I was still angry. No worries. I now have 12 hours to work out my frustration. I depart the house and promptly arrive at her house. Find the spare key and let myself in. I reorganize everything. I mean everything. It didn't take long to do the living room. I moved the couch. I moved the love seat. I moved my father's chair. The coffee table. The TV. Everything gets rearranged. I even moved pictures from wall to wall and used sticky tack to hang them upside down or wonky. Moving into a new place can be a hassle during military moves. I love cooking. The kitchen and wood shop are my sanctuaries. It is such an annoyance to move into a new kitchen and get things where you want them. What's not a pain? Reorganizing someone's kitchen. Everything from top to bottom was reorganized. The powder room was close to the kitchen, so I put plates under the sink in the powder room and toilet paper in the kitchen drawers. Again, everything was moved. I worked my way through the house, ensuring that nothing was left untouched. The only room I didn't enter was the master bedroom. I am one of 3 siblings. I was not interested or mentally willing to screw with that room. I did, however, take great pride in her cricket room to ensure that I moved everything. My last act of damn you in the house was taking every single remote in the house. TV, DVR, cable, lights, you name it. If it was a remote, it was now in my possession. I then returned home at normal time. The changeover was typical. She asked me how my day was, and let me tell you, it was a satisfying day of work for me. She acted as if the kidnapping event never happened. Well, she was about to be reminded that I didn't forget. It was time to crack a beer, play with the boys, and wait for that phone call. Ring, ring, ring. Mom, remember, she is my mom. I love her, but she is different. Were you at the house today? Brain, is she serious? I asked. What? Did you stop by the house today? I think we were robbed. I laughed. Robbed? Yeah, robbers typically move your stuff around. Yes, I stopped by the house. You rearranged the living room? My dad just gets home. During the conversation, I hear my dad talking as he enters the house. What the hell? Dad, Carla, what the hell did you do to the house? I didn't do it. Your son did. She is oblivious still, just looking at the living room. She laughs a bit, and we conclude the conversation. Now I am baffled. Oh well. Ring, ring, ring. Mom, where in the hell are my pots and pans? There is toilet paper under the kitchen sink. Toilet paper does not go there. Damn it. Dad in background. Where is the remote, Carla? I hooked everything back up. I just moved it. Things still worked. Dad, Carla, remote. My mother is now walking through the house. She arrives in her arts and crafts cricket room. Mom, first name, middle, last. What the hell did you do? I reorganized everything for you. Oh, my God. Pause. Dad, Carla, where is the remote for the TV? Where are the remotes? Oh, I took them. I called out your name. I thought you heard me. She now explains to my father. Now there is hysterical laughter in the background. Mom, I am on my way over. She arrived at the house. I am willing to break bread and settle this. Under one condition. Me. All you have to say is you are sorry for kidnapping my child and you won't ever do it again. Mom, I didn't. You want the remotes back? Say I am sorry for kidnapping your kid and I will never do it again. I am sorry for kidnapping Cake and I will never do it again. Thank you. What time are you dropping the boys off tomorrow? I think you should come here until you figure out where your pots and pans are. See you at 6. Love you. Bye. And that's that. Military life is different. Really different. I never thought in a million years I would live in my hometown and still be in the Army. It was great at times. I was totally not expecting all the things that come with living in my hometown after being away for over a decade. The grandparents wanted to make up for years of not seeing them, and they did. There were obviously some learning struggles. Carla admitted defeat, and my dad eventually got his remotes back. Everybody won. She is still a crazy lady. I love her, but boy is she different. Cheers. Story 4. During my time living in a dorm, I had to deal with a challenging situation regarding my insomnia. I explained to my roommates that I struggled with falling asleep and staying asleep unless I adhered to a strict routine. My schedule required me to sleep from 11 p.m. to 7 m.t., and I kindly asked them to minimize noise during those hours. This conversation was prompted after one roommate decided it was acceptable to play loud music at 11 p.m., disrupting my sleep. They didn't take kindly to my request and complained to the dorm supervisor, who informed me that the official quiet hours were from midnight to 6 a.m. The supervisor suggested that if I had an issue with this policy, I could leave, but I had no right to ask anyone to stay quiet outside those designated hours. Message received. Now, my roommates had their own sleep patterns. They usually stayed up until 2 a.m., woke up at 7 a.m., and often napped during the day from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. According to the dorm rules, I had every right to make noise during their nap hours, so I decided to do just that. Each afternoon, while they tried to nap, I played music, chatted on the phone, or invited friends over. This made it impossible for them to get their usual rest. Eventually, their lack of sleep during the day forced them to adjust their schedule. They started going to bed at 11 p.m. to ensure they got enough sleep. While this was a step toward respecting my routine, I wasn't done yet. Since they had already disrupted my ability to maintain my sleep schedule, I felt justified in making noise from 11 p.m. to midnight perfectly within the dorm's quiet hours policy. The result? Another confrontation. This time, they asked me to stop and promise to respect my sleep schedule if I did the same for theirs. After that, no one disrupted my sleep again. Additional context. I didn't anticipate these issues before college because I didn't have insomnia before moving into the dorm. The environment during my first semester was so stressful that it led to an anxiety disorder, which eventually caused my insomnia. Despite the difficulties, I continued living in the dorm because I couldn't afford other accommodations. The notion that they had more of a right to stay there than I did never made sense to me. I wasn't able to use earplugs, as they made it impossible for me to sleep. Additionally, though I had a doctor's note requesting a single room, the limited single rooms were reserved for students with connections to influential individuals at the college, leaving me without that option. Some might argue I should have compromised, but my condition made it impossible to function without a proper sleep schedule. What compromise could have worked in this situation? Cutting back on sleep isn't a sustainable or reasonable solution. In the end, the situation highlighted a frustrating double standard. My request for quiet during sleep hours was met with resistance, yet I was expected to accommodate their needs without question. By asserting my rights within the dorm's policies, I was able to resolve the issue, though not without a fair share of conflict. Story 5. When my husband and I purchased our first home last year, we were thrilled to move into what seemed like a peaceful, charming neighborhood. However, we quickly discovered we had an unwelcome surprise next door. Greg, the HOA president. Greg didn't just enforce the community rules. He wielded his position with an intimidating sense of superiority. He was infamous for showing up unannounced, watching people from his porch, and delivering cryptic warnings about consequences for anyone who didn't comply with his vision of the neighborhood. Our first encounter with Greg's authoritarian streak came after we planted a small vegetable garden in our backyard. It was modest, just a few tomato plants, some herbs, and a trellis carefully placed to avoid bothering anyone. A week later, we received a formal notice from Greg, claiming the garden violated HOA landscaping guidelines. He called it an eyesore and threatened us with a $250 fine unless we removed it. Confused, I reviewed the HOA handbook but found no mention of vegetable gardens being prohibited. I emailed Greg for clarification, and his reply was unsettling. He stated that the rules don't always need to be written down, and that the HOA board which he controlled had the authority to enforce standards to protect the neighborhood's appearance. His email concluded with a veiled threat. I hope you understand how important it is to follow our standards for everyone's sake. Disturbed but determined, we decided not to engage further and quietly ignored the notice. A week later, Greg struck again. This time, he sent a complaint about a small wind chime on our porch, calling it a disturbance to the peace and demanding its removal. The wind chime was tiny and barely audible. It was clear Greg was targeting us specifically. That same week, I noticed Greg standing on the sidewalk near our house late at night, smoking a cigarette and staring at our property. When I looked directly at him, he didn't move. He simply watched until I went back inside. It was unnerving, and my husband and I realized we needed to take action before the situation escalated further. Instead of confronting Greg directly, we decided to fight back by using his own rules against him. After observing his property, We noticed several blatant violations of HOA guidelines. Greg had installed an unapproved fence, a large shed, and a towering flagpole illuminated by a floodlight that lit up half the street, none of which were permitted without prior approval. We compiled detailed documentation of Greg's violations and submitted an anonymous complaint to the rest of the HOA board. To our relief, the board, clearly tired of Greg's behavior, acted swiftly. Within a week, Greg was fined thousands of dollars and ordered to dismantle the unapproved structures or face escalating penalties. Greg was livid. He began prowling the neighborhood even more, glaring at anyone who crossed his path. At the next HOA meeting, he attempted to defend himself, arguing that his additions should be grandfathered in because of his position as president. However, one of the board members, a retired lawyer, countered his argument by reading the HOA bylaws aloud. She highlighted that Greg's additions were not only unapproved but flagrantly against the rules. In a dramatic turn of events, the board voted to remove Greg as HOA president during the meeting. Stripped of his authority, Greg had no choice but to comply with the fines and remove his beloved flagpole and shed. The new HOA president, a kind woman with a love for gardening, approached us at the next meeting to compliment our vegetable garden and wind chime. It was a welcome change from Greg's oppressive reign. As for Greg, he has retreated into his house and barely speaks to anyone. Occasionally, we'll catch him peeking through his curtains, but he hasn't dared to approach us again. For the first time since moving in, we can enjoy our garden, our wind chime, and our home in peace. Greg's reign of terror is officially over.